Chris Lee and Chase Robinson of Southeastern 16 here to talk about what's ahead for Tennessee and a path to the playoff. Boy, Chase, just when we thought things broke really well for the Vols last week, Arkansas had other ideas. But hey, here's the good thing if you're Tennessee. A lot of teams have taken losses they didn't see coming, including Alabama last weekend, including Ole Miss a couple of weekends ago. And the lesson in this, you got a lot of parity. Things are week to week. A lot of things come down to matchups that transcend the point spreads in front of you. And we're going to look at how that affects Tennessee and its path forward here today.
Yeah, that is good for Tennessee. You bring up a good point that, they're not the only team in the SEC with a loss. Alabama, Georgia both have a loss now. Ole Miss has a loss, and so it doesn't feel as bad now for Tennessee, I think, for everything that they want to achieve and what I think they can achieve, even with this loss to Arkansas. Will they drop another game? It's very likely, looking at their schedule, as we'll look at that in a minute. But still, Tennessee very good. I think they have a really good chance to bounce back, and this should be interesting to see what Tennessee does and how they handle it moving forward.
Let's pull up the schedule and the results so far for the Vols. Let me tell you what you're looking at. It's pretty simple. This has been Tennessee's power ranking coming into each game, according to our model, and the opponent's power ranking at the time the game is played. Home field advantage, and the predictor is what the model spit out, which you can see is pretty close to the Vegas line on the far right side. The result is in the middle. We've already previewed the Florida game, but this one has always been tricky for Tennessee. Florida can really run the ball. It's got two good quarterbacks. I will be very interested to see how Florida's defense, which I haven't thought was very good, but did really stop a run-oriented UCF team that last week I thought was a matchup. Look, I think Tennessee wins it, but boy, you need to get this one if you're the Vols, because you got some tough ones going forward.
Yeah, you do. And, Tennessee has struggled when they play in the swamp. This one's in Knoxville. And so I think that gives an advantage to Tennessee in this Florida matchup. But, yeah, you want to get this one. You want to have a win ahead of this Alabama game. It's going to be a showdown there in Knoxville. And, I think that both teams now are in a position where they need to win that game, with Alabama having lost, now with Tennessee having lost. They're both going in, circling this game, say, hey, we got to have this one. And so, yeah, I think the next 2 weeks, Florida and Alabama before that bye week, are two really important games for Tennessee moving forward as you look ahead of the rest of their schedule. Maybe some sneaky games in there. But yeah, these next two I feel like are very important for the Vols.
Yeah, the Alabama game, I think, got more interesting for both teams. Neither team will be able – well, I'm not going to say neither team can afford a loss, because I'm starting to think you can get in the playoff with 3 losses, given the way we've seen some craziness in this league. But, Alabama, Vanderbilt ran on it with a mobile quarterback. I think if you're Tennessee, you look at a lot of things the Commodores did and try to create some similar matchups for Nico Iamaleava, who's more athletic than Diego Pavia, but not as experienced. So to me, boy, you'd kind of love to have that Alabama bye week before that one, but I'm not sure that's a bad thing with what's up for Kentucky. We'll get into that in just a minute. But anyway, I think that Alabama matchup really becomes tricky for both teams, but it is in Knoxville, and what happened last time the game was there.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a really fun game with two really good offensive teams. And yeah, that bye week I think it comes at a good time, because you have a 5-game stretch with 4 good teams in UTEP in there. Mississippi State obviously is struggling, but you've got 4 SEC games in the last 5 games. And Kentucky, you mentioned, they're sneaky, defensively really good. Could cause some problems, I think, for Tennessee offensively. We know Georgia will most likely be favored in the game. But again, 2 really good teams, 2 playoff teams most likely will be playing there, with Tennessee at Georgia, with it being in Athens. And then you finish the season with Vanderbilt, who just beat the number 1 team in the country. Like, this is this is a Vanderbilt team that can do some damage. So I feel like the bye week comes at a really good time because you have a important stretch of 5 games to end the season. And after you, again, played Florida and Alabama.
Yeah, now I want to get into some thoughts on some matchups you just touched on. Before I do that, reminding you, BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff. Get in on our $200,000 mega contest. Pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000 when the game is over. Head on over to our online casino. Get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on all the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. Now, I think that Kentucky matchup is a little bit more concerning than I would have thought a couple of weeks ago. I think Kentucky maybe can replicate some things that Arkansas showed late in that game with 3-man fronts. You've got Oxendine and Deion Walker to try to block their big guys. You got a playmaker in your back 7 and Max Hairston. I think that Kentucky game, and again, like the Alabama game, you're glad that you're Tennessee, that's in your backyard because that's been a place Kentucky's had trouble winning. But stylistically, I'm very interested to see what that looks like. On the other hand, I think having that bye week before Kentucky and maybe digesting some of what the Cats have done, you're not exactly unhappy that you get that there for your Tennessee.
Yeah, when Tennessee comes off the bye week for Kentucky, Kentucky is going to have played Vanderbilt, Florida, and Auburn, and so that's a tough stretch for Kentucky. You're going to catch them right in the midst of, and so for Tennessee, I think the bye week, could help them in that, and the fact that Kentucky's going to have been playing some good football, and I'm interested to see what Mississippi State can do. We saw them kind of challenge Texas at times. Now they're without their starting quarterback now. Mississippi State is Michael Van Buren will come in and lead the Bulldogs. But, can Mississippi State maybe slow Tennessee down some? And then, of course, my eyes are on this Tennessee-Georgia game because I feel like this is one of those games where anything can happen.
Yeah, I hesitate to say this because if the college football season has taught us anything, it's you don't take anything for granted. And State does play hard. I just think having seen them a lot, that's a place where the depth gets them worn down, especially against an up-tempo offense. I think if Mississippi State beat Tennessee, that might be an even bigger shocker than some stuff we've seen with Shapen being out. But you got to show up and play the game and make sure you don't have a letdown after Kentucky. Also think the UTEP game, UTEP is probably a bottom 5 team in college football. That is the kind of team that Tennessee routinely drills. So that leaves us with at Georgia, and we'll see what the Bulldogs are between now and then. Again, tough defensive line, athletes on the back end, something that could be problematic. I mean, let's face it, Georgia's problematic for anybody. And then the Vanderbilt game. I would have thought you were crazy if you were talking about that being anything other than a layup for Tennessee, but we saw what happened with Vanderbilt and Alabama last week. That offensive scheme is so hard to defend. You do not have a bye week ahead of time in that one, which, Alabama had Georgia the week before, but it had a bye week 2 weeks before to maybe start getting ready. That scheme is they are just an outlier.
Yeah.
Now I know the thing that'll happen is Tennessee will have more people in the building in Nashville, I would think, but Alabama did too last week. I think those are like if you get through Alabama and Kentucky and Florida with wins, I think you're going to the playoffs because I think you can at that point take a loss to Georgia and still get there. And I still think they beat Vandy, but man, it's not the layup we thought it was a week ago.
No, it's not. And, a number of things, again, can happen between now and then. But, yeah, I feel like we're looking at maybe a sneaky matchup there with Tennessee and Vandy. It's hard to gauge what Vanderbilt will do the rest of the season. It really is. But I feel like this is going to be a team that's going to win some more games and possibly set up what could be an interesting Thanksgiving weekend there.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing how this all turns out. I think the playoff picture to get there is going to be fascinating. Actually, we're working on that today to try to put out a little content on that. To be honest, I have no idea where I'm going with it. I'm going to look at the numbers, crunch them a little bit, look at the matchups, and try to make an educated guess that will probably be completely wrong. But that is the fun of college football, Chase. And we're here for it. Best way to get our content, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We actually do baseball and basketball even in the off season. So hit your notifications so that you get that. And advertising inquiries, caroline.smith@southeastern14.com. It'll get you to her. And then we reach millions a year. For Chase Robinson, I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 16, presented by BetOnline.